And now, Alexis Madrigal, we all know as the co-host of KQED's Forum. Really appreciate his breadth of knowledge, his wide emotional range. And he's the author of the new book, Pacific Circuit, a globalized account of the battle for the soul of an American city. It's a fascinating read and a sweeping history that illuminates how a few individual activists in Oakland have challenged the global interests in their fight against the legacy of environmental justice. Please join me in welcoming Alexis Madrigal to Climate One. Hey, it's good to see you. Yeah, thanks for joining us on.
Walk-on music and everything. That's nice.
Hey, this is, exactly classy here. So, I don't know how you have time to write books with what you do, but you do. And
it took 9 years, so
okay.
Part of it, yeah.
And you wrote a book about clean tech, which I got to check out. This one you opened by, quote, writing, "What the Mediterranean was for millennia and the Atlantic was for centuries, the Pacific is now. 6 of the 7 most valuable companies in the world are located along the U.S. Pacific coast. Their market values dwarfing the old banking, auto, and oil giants," end quote. And you make the case that it's not LA or San Francisco, or Seattle, that's at the heart of this economy, but Oakland. And I think that's kind of like surprising to some people.
Well, I think the Bay Area is kind of the origin point for this system. I mean, I tried to really connect up the sort of local components that I was seeing, on the ground in Oakland with these sort of global forces. And there's kind of 2 global forces I really look at in the book. One is, of course, what happens after containerization, the development of all of this trade, which then puts more trucks, onto the ground, but also puts more goods into Target and all these other things that people make use of.
And that innovation started here.
It really started in Oakland through the Vietnam War, really. It solved a major military logistical problem. And that set up Oakland as the first major container port on this side of the Pacific. And on the other side, you've got Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, because it really was for the military. But that led through a variety of different companies and circumstances to Oakland being the first of the major container ports in the Pacific.
Wow, and that's an Oakland innovation story that I think a lot of people don't realize. I saw Eric Schmidt talk at TED last week, and the same thing happened. So this happened. Yeah, better to get the sound clear. Thanks. San Francisco often overshadows its sort of brother on the other side of the city. So is this part of a larger thing where the kind of Oakland innovates and doesn't get credit for it?
Well, I think that Oakland is sort of part of this metropolitan area, right? Yeah. And that metropolitan area kind of has these 3 components. One is sort of going across the Pacific, the kind of banking links, the political links, all these things. The other is Silicon Valley, which is sort of down, south of San Francisco, of course, and contribute a lot of the information technology that's necessary to control these systems of production that stretch across the Pacific. But Oakland is sort of the part of this region that has both, it's kind of like the back lot, right? It's where you can sort of see the infrastructure at work. It's where you really get the worst impacts for people's health. And it's also a place that sort of is inside the sort of understanding of technology in the Bay Area, but isn't kind of inside its logic, right? It's not, if you're in Oakland, you don't have to buy into what Silicon Valley is doing, but you can see it because you're sort of proximate to it.
Yeah, it's part of a bigger system. I get that. You also write that, quote, "The miniaturization of the transistor, the maximization of the cargo ship, and the securitization of the mortgage are more related than they appear." And when I read that, I was like, unpack that and connect those for us.
Yeah, you basically need a lot of computer chips, that is to say, transistors, to do the sort of information technology and communication that controls these systems. It's really something longshoremen who are experiencing containerization as a form of automation, they're kind of the first people to point this out, that these things are connected, right? That if you're gonna have these factories spread across the world, you need all this technology to control them. And then the US, which really developed this system of trade across the Pacific, encouraged all these export-oriented economies along the Pacific Rim. Those economies have to hold dollar-denominated assets, which then juice our debt markets and all of the sort of money that we're able to use here in the United States. And so that's really the relationship, is it ends up becoming this kind of set of arrows. You can almost imagine these technologies, these dollars, and these containers kind of all working together.
Transistors, of course, kind of, if not invented, popularized, developed in Silicon Valley.
They're the silicon in Silicon Valley, basically. Yeah.
Right. And also note, you mentioned longshoremen, that this building, because the Longshore Workers Union, of course, came out of the strike in San Francisco. This building is where a couple of longshoremen's bodies came after they were killed in the strike. And so this is actually part of a historic building in the creation of the Longshore Workers Union. So as trade got containerized, ships got bigger, ports got bigger, cranes got bigger. How did that affect port cities like Oakland?
Well, back then, Oakland was kind of a minor port city, right?
San Francisco had a port that
San
people
Francisco
don't remember.
was if we can imagine San Francisco in your head, or anyone who's listening, you can look it up on Google Maps. You can see this kind of crown of piers that surround the city. That's where trade used to happen, was like right in downtown San Francisco, right outside this building. The shape-ups for longshoremen before they got their union were like literally right on Embarcadero here. Kind of like the scene outside Home Depot these days, but like many, many, many more people. And containerization basically required a lot more land. Right here, ships would pull up to the pier, they'd unload onto the dock, a teamster would come and bring that stuff to a warehouse somewhere. A lot of it was in Soma, south of Market Street here in San Francisco. With containerization, you need a place to stick all the containers before all these diesel trucks arrive to take those things to distribution centers, the Targets and Walmarts of the world. And so because of that, you found these companies like Sealand, like Matson, these early container companies, knew immediately that they were going to go to Oakland, where they had two important things. They had land that was right near the water, and they also had a neighborhood in West Oakland that was disempowered, largely black, and that the city had been trying to destroy for quite some time. Sometimes I call the plot against West Oakland, and you can see it through city documents all the way, and the city of Oakland immediately sees this would accomplish multiple goals to put a port here: economic development on one side, and the further deterioration of this neighborhood environmentally on the other, in hopes of pushing people out.
Wow. Yeah, it's intentional. It's not like an accident that these things happen to be the way they are.
It's absolutely intentional. I mean, you've got a report in 1936, major report about sort of the nature of Oakland buildings and city planning, in which they literally say, we want to crowd out people who are living here. And the other part of it was, we're going to segregate this neighborhood with a freeway, to segregate out the sort of mixed race neighborhood that was the western part of West Oakland from the less mixed race neighborhood that was on the eastern part. And of course, West Oakland does end up surrounded by freeways, which of course has all the health impacts we're going to hear about later from Ms. Margaret.
Yeah, that's no accident. So it's really pollution as policy.
It really is. I mean, it's to me, some of those documents are so amazing from that time period, because you see them just saying it, just like, we're trying to do this. We know this is going to make housing worse. We know this is going to make people's lives worse, but this is the plan.
Right. And then, the whole conversation about what's happening today. As the Port of Oakland was being developed to accommodate First Army, Navy, then going to Korea, that sort of, opened the door to container ships. So what was the city's, approach then? So the containerization, isn't that kind of, where does that lead?
Yeah, I mean, the city releases another report, part of this whole kind of development policy, in which they literally say the kinds of things that you would hear at Davos. They're like, we must capture the trade of the rising Orient, and this is how we're gonna make Oakland work, and all these things. And then they basically set about, there's a guy named Ben Nutter, who was kind of the visionary of Oakland's container port. They set about building terminals and infrastructure to capture this new containerized trade, really starting with Japanese shipping companies, who were the first to come through Oakland, but then proceeding to a wide variety of other Asian countries.
Right. So the region captures the value of all this trade. Silicon Valley is getting rich. And sounds like Oakland is a sacrifice zone, what we call a sacrifice zone.
Yeah, certainly parts of, right? I mean, there are shipping companies and there are longshoremen who make money as a result of this trade, right? There's a table for them to sit at. There's a place where both like the shippers and the people who do the work of shipping can get in on this sort of global fund. But there really isn't a place for the community. I mean, the community essentially is just being dumped upon without necessarily being able to access the economic opportunities that the port had generated through time. And I think, I think a lot of that stuff is like quite intentional. I mean, the port's like political project in a lot of ways is keeping people from thinking about the people who live near the port.
And it's true of big fossil fuel projects too. Oftentimes, Navajo Nation people don't have electricity, and there's a big coal plant near them, but they can't get the electricity that's generated there. Yeah. The Bay Area has such a reputation for environmental action that it's easy to not notice some of the perverse effects which you explore in your book. For example, you make the point that protecting undeveloped land in the 70s meant overburdening already developed land. So they were kind of protect Marin or pretty places, but you double down on pollution in places like Oakland.
And also, just the focus of the environmental movement, right, is on saving the bay, which I think we're glad that happened, that it didn't all become paved in, doesn't look like the LA River. So I'm glad that sort of stuff happened. I mean, all the open land that's been preserved, outside of the like downtown and urban cores is obviously a good thing. At the same time, I mean, it's the reason why environmental justice was such an important corrective to what had happened in the environmental movement. People, I think for too long, and even today, remarkably, despite all the amazing work of environmental justice activists, people still interpret, I think, environmentalism as being about nature and the out-there-ness, and not people's lives and the health of people's environments.
Right. The Sierra Club, the verdant places, they don't think of, when we should specify West Oakland we're talking about, which is different than Oakland is, the hills and there's the flatlands.
Well, and Sierra Club is a great example because they actually have helped in this fight against this bulk export terminal, which would send coal trains through West Oakland. Sierra Club has been a major component of that fight as they sort of figure the relationship out between these global issues like climate change, of course, most prominently, and the local activism that's like so necessary. Because at the end of the day, like every fossil fuel plant, every mine, all these things, there's a local environmental situation that goes right alongside and that directly impacts people even more than the sort of global picture.
Right. And so that's still happening today, because coal is kind of declining in the U.S. They want to get coal to export markets. That goes through, might go through the port in West Oakland. So today we have this global trade hub in West Oakland, that runs on fossil fuels. In a moment, we'll bring on Ms. Margaret Gordon of West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project.
Formerly of the West Oakland.
And you almost titled your book, Everybody Knows Miss Margaret. So tell me what drew you to her.
I mean, you're going to hear from her. Ms. Margaret is a powerful leader, someone who has brought people together not by sort of deluding herself, but by people being magnetized to her. People, have talked with her family, talked to people who've known her all through her life, talked with tons of people in West Oakland about her. And I think, the main thing that I always think about Ms. Margaret is she shows up. She's showing up to stuff, she knows stuff, and she shares that knowledge with a whole tree of people through West Oakland. And I think that sometimes we kind of forget, one of my friends is a social worker, and he's like, sometimes the prescription is relationship. And I think in a lot of cases, when we talk about organizing people, we talk about what we're trying to do here on this earth. Sometimes I think people get a little too caught up with well, what are the ideas? What's the solution? What's this special innovation that's going to unlock everything? And it's sometimes the prescription is actually just relationship building. I mean, over and over, I feel like this comes up in Miss Margaret's work, that the reason they could get things done is because they knew the people through time.
Yeah, novel idea for a lot of men, but not for women or indigenous people.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's bring her on. Please, thank you, Alexis. Let's bring on Ms. Margaret Gordon.
Yeah. Woo. You good? Hey, how are you? This is funny. This is different than when we were talking to West Oakland. You want that pillow? I grab that pillow. Yeah. There you go.
Well, hello, everyone.
Yeah. Ms. Margaret, let's maybe start with the most direct thing, which is just kind of like the impact of fossil fuels in West Oakland on your family, on the community, and sort of how you came to really see those impacts.
I moved to West Oakland. Well, first of all, I'm a third generational West Oakland person. My great aunts were riveters in Richmond during the war, and they raised my mother, whose mother had died. And they moved after the war machine was over in Richmond. They moved to West Oakland, and I used to come. I'm from San Francisco, but born in Richmond. And every summer I would go to West Oakland, 8th and Campbell, for my summer home.
Like a couple blocks from where you live now.
You're right. I would go and play at Prescott School. Yeah. All right, so that's how I know about West Oakland.
And what about when you were kind of coming into your like prime as a community leader, like late 80s, early 90s, you moved back to West Oakland. Like, what are the things that you were sort of seeing, like, right in front of your eyes or feeling in your lungs, you know, that made you think, like, I should get involved?
Why is this truck on my block?
Yeah.
Why is this truck on this street? Yeah. Why is this truck running this engine? Why it runs into the neighborhood store at 7th and 7th and Willow? Yeah. Why? Or why was the post office distribution center from where I live at allowing trucks to run their engines? Why was this trucks running 24/7 in our neighborhood of West Oakland, and then when you went downtown or you went to Emeryville, there was no such thing happening? And then also there was an incident where is that, why is this black stuff on my walls when I open up my window? That's coming out the tailpipe of the trucks. So there was always been the question why and who was going to give us the answers? Who's going to give me the answers? And then I got a part-time job doing some community violence prevention program, and I would go visit the school nurse at Prescott Elementary School, and I used to see all these inhalers and shoe boxes with kids' names on it, or baskets. And I used to ask her why. She said, well, all these kids have asthma. Well, I have asthma also. I said, well, why is that so many kids? Why so many kids? She said, well, I don't know. So eventually, there was a project came to West Oakland. It was a small grant and what gave us a project, how to ask the questions to researchers about these issues, as called indicators. And so one of the indicators was about air quality, and it rolled from there.
Yeah. You know, the air quality impacts in West Oakland were really always been about the trucks, right? The trucks that are, and so did the trucks basically lead you right into the port? Is that like when you started saying, well, why are the trucks here? The answer is really the port and the post office.
Well, you also got to remember that the truck issue is where closer to the people. And why is that? The city, nor the county, nor the federal government was moving them. There was a buffer area between where the people houses are and where people live at in these trucks. That was never calculated as a part of this having this business or this industry or this facility in West Oakland called the Port of Oakland. Nor after the freeway fell in 1989
during major earthquake.
Yes. Not to rebuild the freeway, former Cypress Freeway, back where it was, but push it back to the shoreline. And it still was a problem because we still had a fence line or a line that where the freeway was still bringing pollution into the neighborhood. So it's also, nobody was measuring the cumulative impacts of having the trucks, the trains, the ships, and the cargo handling equipment that runs on diesel. That's a difference that brings in and running on 2 freeways all in the middle of West Oakland to have a cumulative impact.
So you get involved with all these issues. People get to know you in the community. Kind of legendary Bay Area politician named Ron Dellums, through a kind of difficult fight, gets you onto the Port Commission, the first ever resident of West Oakland to ever actually be on the Port Commission, which is, literally this neighborhood is separated by like 4 blocks from like all this port industry. And you go at all these things through this maritime air quality improvement plan, right?
Yes.
How much of an impact were you able to make during that time, like in terms of cutting the amount of particulate emissions that are in the neighborhood?
Well, it was a bottom-up fight. Nothing was about that. By term of 5 years of being on the port, about top down. And one of my saving graces, what I had to make relationships with agencies and
like EPA, Bay Area Air Quality.
We as West Oakland Environmental Indicators at that time had to develop our own collaboration of agencies and bring our own data and research to them and let them prove it, what we said or what we asked or what was we had reported or recorded was accurate. So one of the things that we had organized, as I'm coming from a background organizer, we brought the agencies to one table. So we didn't have to run over here, we didn't have to run over there. They came to our table in West Oakland. And then also, eventually we did include the port staff and the city staff as needed.
And one of the things that I've always found fascinating about the work that you're doing during that time is, when we talk about air quality, oftentimes there's just like the one sensor. It's like a regional picture of it. And what your group did was go gather like street level data, because that's where all the people are. That's where the lungs are, right? It's like down on the street.
Because we wanted to know from a truck go by that what's coming out that tailpipe hit the sidewalks when you open your front door or open your window. What was that? How much was that? And also, what was the public health problems to us based on the data that we got from public health, the state public health department, the county? 1 out of 5 children from the ages of 0 to 5 end up in emergency services for respiratory disease. We know that, like I just said, the individual schools in West Oakland, the kids had, a school nurse had inhalers in the nurse's office. We also know that through a study that we did with Kaiser Foundation, there was a high level of cardiovascular disease with people between the ages of 55 and 68. So all these things eventually we keep publishing and making others, and also doing our own air monitoring. We had these portable backpacks of air monitors that detected PM 2.5 and 10, that we were able to really get the real certification and also peer review that we were right about. There was stuff on the ground, it was not totally up in the air.
And they also worked with public health officials who were able to show that there were, the life expectancy for people living in these zip codes were just much, much lower than people living in the hills, which of course people kind of knew, but like Miss Margaret's saying, getting the data actually mattered, and it was important to make that data do stuff.
But also, one of the saving graces, you keep using that word, people kept coming to us as the information got out, what we were doing. We had Intel knocking on our door because they wanted to put something in a cell phone, which I had no idea was called an app, that you could hold your cell phone up and you could calculate what's in the air, the air quality in your vicinity, all right? So we also had University of Washington come to us, put out pre-sensors throughout the neighborhood. We also did a project with
Google,
the Google Earth car with Acoma of driving through the neighborhood. And also after that, how do we energize the community with the information. So those are some of the things that had to be done often to be more consistent and building collaboration and coordination of the work that we've done. Without that, we would never have been, the West Oakland environmental indicators would not be in the position that it has been. Plus, like you said, I went to everything. I didn't miss a conference, a symposium, a seminar, nothing. Workshop, I didn't miss anything because it was necessary for the gathering of the information. You don't have the information, they would tell you anything.
And they're like, during this time too, I mean, there's like 5 redevelopment projects of different kinds going on at different times. So you build all these relationships. I want to move us to the old Oakland Army base. We've kind of referenced it earlier, that there's been this massive redevelopment of the Army base. And as a piece of it, a developer has been trying to put in a bulk export terminal with money from Utah coal miners. And you have been one of the people, along with No Coal in Oakland, that's been kind of leading the fight against...
15 years.
It's been 15 years. What do you think the fight against this terminal says about the struggle against fossil fuel interests?
Okay, let's go back to the when the land, former military base, Army base, was determined to be a redevelopment area. And they had got federal funds to do some of the infrastructure work to change this. And the deal of writing the planning process, it was never stated that the developer would bring in a commodity called coal. It was never there. He inserted that as he could not find money to build out his terminal. And he was trying to be the master developer for both sides of the Army base, the city side and the port side. So in order for him to be able to recoup money and to build this and have investors, that's how coal got put there. But it was never original plan. And the operation of this bulk port. Bulk means loose commodity come in on a ship or in a Rolo, which is a ship that you put stuff at the bottom. But that was never intended as a commodity to be moved in Oakland.
So does the coalition for working against that bulk terminal look the same as the ones that you put together to work on the other environmental justice issues? Or do you think it looks different? Like, do the...
It is different. Yeah. It is different because there are a variety of individuals from all over Oakland and the Bay Area who are sitting at this table, who are doing this, looking at doing this work. And also the relationships that they have built outside of Oakland, as far as Utah, what's happening up in Humboldt County, what's happening in Oregon, that's been going back and forth where they tried to make, working towards all these different types of loose commodity that would cause impact to the environment. So, you know, like pet coke is an issue in Stockton. They still want to build that terminal. So one of the things that what happened is we had to file a complaint of trying to use a 20-year-old EIR environmental impact report to put an aggregate company from Canada. Aggregate is the stuff that makes cement. And we had to file a formal complaint to the state that this is not acceptable. And there was no real mitigations. And how can you use a 20-year-old EIR when the EIR did not even include anything about fossil fuels or GHG? All right, 20 years ago, it was not the same thing as 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
How do you think about the connection between these like hyper-local environmental issues that you end up working on the ground with like the really big picture, you know, global climate change?
I see the global climate change is about global climate justice, the justice piece. We have no real plan how to insert justice to those who are most vulnerable and impactful. Every project that I know of internationally has started from the most indigenous people asking the questions why this is happening to us. I just came back from, in early April, a community of international and national EJ groups, far as Polynesia, organizing themselves to ask the question, why is this sea level rise and what is the mitigations that we should have to protect ourselves? And that's one of the problems. We have too many others want to come in and talk about what they want to do instead of working with and not with and sometimes for those most impacted. Don't come in with your plan, your agenda, as that like we don't know. We have the lived experience and our realities. That's the problem, that too many big NGOs and others come in, don't think about the justice piece. That's the last thing on, because they see their theory is the only thing that matters, and not what the people who are most impactful or vulnerable have the experience and have experience in the reality. That's a whole different mindset in the planning and the strategy.
You know, in this political moment, you've got the Trump administration going after environmental justice groups, cutting all kinds of grant funding, going after history. And I know there are some people out there feeling, hopeless, feeling disempowered. And when I run into you in Oakland over the last few months, that is not the feeling I have gotten from you. So as someone who's, spent her career, battling powerful interests, oftentimes from outside of, or quite far away from the levers of power, like what would your message be to people?
Well, I come from a family of people who have always been engaged. And I have lived through the anti-poverty movement. I lived through Nixon. I lived through Reagan. Now I'm living through Trump. All right. So what's the only difference is that from those other situations, he has the power of the pen to make these executive orders. But there's still a bunch of us who have hope and faith in the law for the people who are most vulnerable and who are most impactful, to be able to get on the right path to saving our lives through justice. And I think that's one of the people got to have the faith and understanding of how. I'm a history fan. I love history. And I always want to know how people overcame adversity. And I think one of the things that public education and families do not know, that type of a history. Some of us have had struggles. You struggle for unity and struggle more for unity. And has to be not at the top, but at the bottom where the people are most vulnerable and impacted. So that is my word, that you just can't fall. If you fall down, you got to learn how to roll over and get back up.
Also the backbone too, though, right? I mean, that's one of the things I like. When we've talked a little bit about this particular political moment, you've kind of been like, I feel like these people don't know how to fight.
Well, that's true. All right, but fighting and being violent is two different things. Fighting and violence is two different things, and people connect those two together. And they don't know how to separate them. My fighting back is always about, hey, to push back when the stuff is incorrect. Pushing back when those things that you're saying in your mind's eye, you think that you're improving my life. No. I want to be able to express and have a voice in my own design, plan of action, strategy, land use, design, on all those different things. So that's part of the education that many of us don't have to look at all these different variables that they bring to us about our neighborhoods and our community. So West Oakland, I see the time is up.
You can finish your thought.
Okay. People need to understand about West Oakland. It was an unincorporated community until the 60s. We still have communities unincorporated throughout the United States where they're always dumping something. Because if it's unincorporated, the land is cheap, and you get to do what you want to do based on who is the developer and who is the planner. And none of that stuff is based in public health to take care of people who are there living in those communities. So the issue of land use, zoning, proximity is never applied to these major industrial projects.
Miss Margaret, thanks so much for all your work. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.